can be teachers and actors and such. Mamas, don't let your cowboys grow up to be writers. They're lost in their heads and they won't go to bed, even with someone they love. Writers ain't easy to look, and they're harder to read. If you want description, they'll give you much more than you need. Noisy typewriters and turtleneck sweaters, and each day begins with a line. And if you don't understand him and he don't die young, you'll get raised in them old New York Times. So mama, don't let
Good evening. Good evening.
grow up to be right.
Good evening. My name is McCarthy Coyle, and you're watching and listening to a public conversation, and we're in a period of the election season, and we're interviewing candidates for federal office tonight. We have two guests who will be joining us shortly. Leo Hudetz from Billings, Democrat running for the nomination to the United States House of Representatives to replace Representative Pat Williams. And then we also have Alan Mikkelson, who's running for the GOP nomination to the United States House of Representatives. Thanks for tuning in, and as most of you know, this show is brought to you over the facilities of Missoula Community Access Television, and it's a pleasure to be here. And before I introduce our guests, I was just recalling news that certainly has been part of Montana's scene. We all are familiar with the Fort Missoula situation and that land deal, and I noticed in the Associated Press report that the Attorney General of Montana has issued his report, which in fact said that the Board of Regents has been acting unconstitutionally and illegally for some time in land deals involving 2,200 acres worth $4.5 million. And so the Attorney General has asked the Board of Regents to give their reaction to that report by mid-July. But when I read this report, I was thinking about the 7-Up peat mine proposed for the Lincoln area up on the Blackfoot River, and the fact that much of that land is state school lands, in the public trust where that mine is proposed for. And I find it interesting that the public relations material supplied by the 7-Up Peat Corporation indicates that Montana Tech, who is connected to those specific public lands up on the Blackfoot, will, over the life of the mine, according to the company, produce $55 million in royalties for Montana Tech. Well, I guess you could call that good news for a university, but on the other hand, as this report from the Attorney General indicates, that there is more to the public trust than just maximum financial benefit. So I think that the significance of that mine's being proposed for lands which are in the public trust should be of importance to us. So that's it. I just wanted to call attention to those matters. And now I'd like you to welcome our guests this evening. Gentlemen, please come on in. Yeah. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Alan, good to see you.
See you. You sitting there?
See, we do have what are called dressers at Missoula Community Access Television. Thanks, Jeff. And first, I'd like to introduce our guests, and I'd like to thank you very much for coming to Missoula and spending this time with us. And I'd like to also thank you for running for public office. A lot of us want to, and then decide not to. So I know it's a hard road. So congratulations for deciding to give it your best shot.
Well, thank you.
And let me start with Leo Hudetz, who's the auditor of Yellowstone County, Montana, and hails originally from Illinois.
That's right.
Is that right? And graduated Northern Illinois University. And you were captain of the football team there.
That's right.
The Huskies, the Northern
That's
Illinois
right.
Huskies.
Played Montana one year.
All right. Did you win or lose?
We lost.
Okay. And Leo is a Democrat seeking the nomination of the Democratic constituency to fill the upcoming House seat in the Congress. Leo, after graduation from DePaul University with a master's in business administration, found yourself in VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America, which folks will remember as the Domestic Peace Corps, right?
That's right.
And it was through VISTA that you found yourself on the Crow Reservation.
That's right.
Working down there. And then, as I understand from your background material, you went on to teach at
Little Bighorn College.
the tribal community college there. And then you went on to become president of that college.
That's right.
And at that time you met and married, tell us whom you married.
Well, I met and fell in love with Janice Littlelight, and we've been married for 16 years, and we have one child now.
Right. And I noticed your material indicated that she was the granddaughter of a famous Indian?
Of Chief Medicine Crow, and she's also a descendant of Red Cloud, the famous Sioux chief.
Right. And you were elected, you beat out a Republican opponent in 1990 in Yellowstone County for the auditor's position, is that right?
That's right.
And then you were re-elected in 1994.
That's right.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And Alan Mikkelson. You're 43 years old?
Actually 44.
44, okay.
Recently.
And you're a rancher up near St. Ignatius, Montana?
That's correct.
And this is a ranch that's been in your family, that your grandfather originally settled that ranch, is that correct?
That's correct, in McCarthy.
Right, and you attended the Montana State University in Ag Studies for some time, and then you were at the Montana Police Academy?
Right, I'm a graduate of the Montana Law Enforcement Academy.
Okay, and then you were with the police department in Bozeman for some time?
Yes.
And then you returned to the ranch? Is that?
That's correct.
And working and raising your family up there. You have 3 children.
Yes.
And your background also indicates that you've been an active pilot from.
That's correct. We run a resource consulting business, and then we ran a mountain flying service until about a year and a half ago.
Good. And then you take a great interest in water issues. Is that right?
Most natural resource issues.
Good. All right. Well, I have some questions. We talked a little bit about the format. Alan, let's start with you. Let's say you wound up in the House of Representatives in Washington next year. What are the 2 issues that are tops on your agenda that you want to work on?
Well, if I had to define just 2 surface issues, probably are tax reform and regulatory reform.
Regulatory reform, okay. And what would be your choice for your first choice? What committee would you want to serve on in the House of Representatives? Resource
Committee would be my first choice. Ag would be my second.
Agriculture?
Yes.
Your second choice, okay. And your top issues?
Well, Mac, probably my top issue is number 1, we're having such a hard time balancing the budget. That would be a top issue. Let's get the budget balanced. And I think with my background as a CPA, master's degree in business and 16 years business experience, I would have a lot of assets bringing to that job. I think the second issue that's very important to me is the shrinking middle class and the loss of good paying jobs and the loss of the standard of living for a lot of our working men and women. And I would like to address those issues.
Okay, and going on here on the national or international or local scene, in government or out of government, who is a mentor for you? You know, who on the world stage or the Montana stage, who most inspires you?
My mentor, you're talking in political circles?
Any circle, any circle.
Well, I haven't really given that a lot of thought. I do a lot of reading. I admire a lot of people that have served this state and this country. Of course, growing up as a young boy in the 60s, John F. Kennedy was an inspiration to a lot of us. He gave a lot of Americans hope when he was president. And I believe another mentor of mine is my father. I mean, my dad is a big inspiration and a great advisor to me, and whenever I have a problem or a question, I like to give him a call.
Alan?
Well, if I had to choose a political figure, a current political figure, I would say Dick Armey is someone who interests me greatly. I don't agree with him all the time, but more often than not. And if I had to pick a Montana figure, I think I would pick my wife.
Okay.
My wife, I think, is one of the most intelligent, articulate, and talented people that I've ever met.
So that means that all right, well, I wanted to ask, Dick Armey he's the Republican whip, or?
No, he's the House Majority Leader.
Okay, right, the House Majority Leader of the Republicans now, and he's from Texas,
yes.
Right? Okay.
Originally from North Dakota.
And to you then, first, what do your friends and supporters consider to be your strongest point as a person?
Probably commitment and tenacity, followed by my trusting nature, which is also my biggest fault.
Trusting nature? Okay. And yourself?
Well, a lot of people tell me I'm honest, and a lot of people tell me maybe I'm too honest. And I think my second greatest asset that people tell me is I'm a hard worker. I've always have worked hard.
Okay. Pro-choice, right to life, where are you on that?
Well, I'm opposed to abortion. I know it's a law of the land, but I'm opposed to abortion. But what I'm in favor of is funding and programs that provide nutritional programs to children, child care to mothers who are trying to get off welfare, life-giving programs.
So, okay, and that's under no circumstances.
No, I would say in cases of rape or incest or the life of the mother, I would be in favor of allowing abortions.
Okay. Yourself there.
Well, there's not a great deal of difference between Leo and I on this one, McCarthy. I'm also very pro-life. I am maybe just a little bit more dogmatic, if you will, about issues of rape and incest, because I do believe that there is a child involved there, and the only conditions that I would consider would be if the life of the mother was in danger.
And the other end of our lives now, which is becoming more controversial, the right to die. The Ninth Circuit in the federal courts recently issued a decision which opposing or finding it illegal for a state to forbid physician-assisted, suicide or end-of-life thing. And that's an increasingly significant issue to people around the country. Have you given that any thought, and where are you on that?
I think that goes along with the right to life issue, and I think that, frankly, that was an incorrect decision on the part of the court. There are some very deep moral and ethical issues involved here, and I don't believe that, I think the court reached that decision in somewhat of a hasty manner, and I know the justice that crafted the decision, and I don't think it was a particularly well-crafted decision or a correct decision.
Leo?
Well, this is a question that's facing a lot of Americans, and I think there's a lot of difficult issues that families have to face when they have a loved one that's on life support system. Now, that's one question, and I think families should have a right to make that decision whether they want to continue someone's life artificially. But as far as physician-assisted suicides and the ability for physicians to advise people or encourage people to have these, I'm opposed to.
Okay. Do you believe that the right to keep and bear arms includes allowing assault weapons?
I'm a strong believer in the Second Amendment to keep and bear arms, and I believe Montanans feel that it is their right, and it's important for Montanans to own weapons for sporting purposes, for protection purposes. And I think the assault weapons, semi-automatic assault weapons, can be repealed, the ban on those. I don't think automatic assault weapons should be legal, but semi-automatic assault weapons should be allowable without a ban on them.
So just to be sure I understand, in other words, there are certain categories of weaponry that you believe should be disallowed.
Well, the weapons, when I say automatic assault weapons, the machine gun type weapons where you hold your finger down on the trigger and it just constantly shoots, those should never be allowed. There should be a ban on them. But as far as semi-automatics, I think we can allow that.
Well, I'm an avid firearms enthusiast. We have a 300-yard shooting range at home, and I'm an active hand loader and target shooter. I don't believe that there should be a restriction on the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. I oppose the Brady bill, and I oppose the assault weapons ban. Interestingly enough, it has been legal. Most people don't understand this, but it has been legal to own fully automatic weapons in this country if you have a permit for them. And that's been that way since about 1933, I believe.
And do you support or oppose an increase to the minimum wage, whether that's the state of Montana where there's a movement on now, or if you got to Washington, do you think that there's a need for an increase in the minimum wage?
My background is in economics, and I think that politically increasing the minimum wage is a very easy thing to advocate for. I'm not sure, frankly, from an economic perspective, that it is going to really add all that much to the quality of life for anybody. And also, I believe that we'll probably have that taken care of before either of us get to Washington, since it appears that it may be moving through the House and Senate this summer. But I think I would maybe reluctantly support it, but I'm not going to be a big booster of increasing the minimum wage.
Leo?
I believe we need an increase in the minimum wage. I think it's long overdue. As far as real buying power, the minimum wage is at a 40-year low. I have a background in economics. I have a lot of background in business with an MBA. I don't agree that we should artificially hold this minimum wage down. Now, I know Dick Armey from Texas wants to keep the minimum wage where it is, but in the last day or two we've seen a break with the Republicans, where some of the Republicans are even saying it's time to increase the minimum wage. I think 40% of the people in this country are single-parent homes that are relying on that minimum wage, and I think it's a travesty that we're paying that low of a wage, and we should raise it.
Labor unions generally oppose right-to-work laws. Do you support or oppose right-to-work laws?
I oppose right-to-work laws. I think unions should have a right to have their union members belong to a union once a union has been legally established in a company.
I'm going to maybe go a little bit out on a limb here, because we haven't addressed this very publicly in the rest of the race, and say that I have a tendency to probably support right-to-work laws. Particularly, I'm particularly opposed to the use of union dues for political activities, and I think that's the biggest bugaboo that I see out there.
In the last 2 years, there have been 17 locomotive engineers killed on the job nationally. And in the last 5 years, there have been over 200 accidents on railroads in Montana alone. In light of that record, where do you stand on federal oversight of the railroads? More oversight, or just let the railroads continue the way they are?
I think we have a fairly appropriate amount of oversight. I saw some statistics just in the last 2 or 3 days that indicated, I believe they were Montana Rail Link statistics, and Rail Link is at I think about a 3-year low. They're lower this year than they were last year, They've been going up and down a little bit, but I think that we've got an appropriate amount of regulation on the railroads, and I think that they're doing a responsible job of trying to keep these accidents in hand, because it costs them a lot of money.
Yeah.
Well, we've seen in the last a few days ago where we had the derailment, and all the residents are still waiting to go home here west of town with the chlorine leak. And I really, these statistics, I haven't heard them, what you just gave me, Mac, but I think with that in mind, we need to make sure there is a strong oversight as far as rail safety in this country. I was just driving through Hobson and saw the derailment still sitting there that happened a while back with all the boxcars laying along the road. I think we need a national traffic safety board that makes sure that we monitor rail and make sure passenger and cargo is safe on these rails.
And do you believe in federal subsidies for agriculture? And if you do, does that include the tobacco industry? And does either of you have, get subsidies for agricultural businesses?
Do I get subsidies?
No, well, the main question is, do you believe in federal subsidies for agriculture?
Well, we got to remember agriculture is our #1 industry in this state, and it's very important to Montana. And how ag goes, so goes the rest of Montana. And we have to compete. We have to compete with Canada, that's getting major subsidies. And as a congressman, I want to protect our ag industry. And this bill that just went through, the Freedom to Farm Act of 1996, decouples, and this is kind of a long drawn-out bill, and we probably don't want to talk about it now, but I was opposed to the decoupling of the market price from the support price. So I guess the answer would be yes, I'd be in favor of some kind of subsidies to make sure that our family farmers and ranchers can stay in the business.
And when the tobacco people came up in the House and said, are you going to support me on the tobacco subsidy?
Well, let me say that I think tobacco is a very damaging drug, which it is. It's very damaging to our youth. I'm not going to say right now that Montana should get subsidies and the tobacco industry shouldn't, but I'd be willing to look at whether they should be subsidized or not. But I think it'll come down to a real debate whether, if wheat can be subsidized, should tobacco be subsidized, and you know how emotional that debate will get.
Well, I think the current farm bill is in the process, as Leo has said, of decoupling subsidies and prices. I think we're headed in the right direction. I'm not very thrilled, frankly, with the straight line declining subsidies that they've got over the next 7 years. I think that was largely a move on the part of both Republicans and Democrats to try to buy some farm state votes. I think the one thing that we really need to do in the farm bill, and that's not in the farm bill and emphasized enough, is to increase export enhancements, because that's what truly will allow our farmers to produce for the world market and compete on a world level. And so I favor very strong export enhancement programs. Some people say that that's a subsidy. I think that they could be handled in a way that they wouldn't be a major subsidy. As far as tobacco goes, I'm not particularly thrilled about tobacco as a crop or anything like that. But at the same time, you have to understand that when you get into the situation as you're talking about in the House well itself, and you're working on issues that might support and benefit Montana ag producers, you may have to be in a situation to support other crop subsidies, not just, they may be tobacco, sugar, cotton, peanuts, or anything like that. Very difficult question.
What about big controversy the last couple of years in Washington, and of course affecting us here at home? Any increases in grazing fees on public lands? Where are you on that? What's going on here?
The grazing fee issue is a little bit of a poster child issue, as far as I can see, because it's a very easy issue for people in urban areas to understand. The real issue to deal with in grazing reform is not necessarily grazing fees so much as it is grazing practices and grazing management and the grazing advisory and range advisory, resource advisory councils that have been instituted by Secretary of Interior Babbitt. it's, I think that when you start talking about grazing fees themselves, you have a tendency to camouflage the true nature of the debate.
Well, you're in agriculture.
I'm in
right?
agriculture,
Yeah.
and I should also say that I have not been receiving any subsidies for quite a while. We raise cattle, sheep, hay, and grain, and the last wool check we got was several years ago, and of course the wool incentive program has gone by the wayside now.
Mm-hmm. Folks, by the way, we'll be taking your calls in just a few minutes. We got a few more questions we want to go through and maybe give the candidates a chance to elaborate or bring up things that I will not have. Grazing fees.
Well, again, this is an issue that we've heard a lot about, but I know farmers that are getting BLM leases, and they have told me they really haven't been opposed to some kind of raise in their grazing fees, farmers and ranchers. But I think you also have to remember that these farmers and ranchers are making major improvements on these lands that have to be taken into consideration. A lot of times these lands are not the best lands in the world for them to be farming and grazing on, so that has to be taken into consideration. And again, we've got to keep in mind that agriculture is our #1 industry, and we need to protect that.
And what about hard rock mining? This is a two-part question. Should the mining industry pay higher royalties on minerals discovered on public lands? And second part, do you favor the construction of 2 new gold mines, one on the Blackfoot River, 7 Up Pete, and the other, the one 2 miles from Yellowstone Park?
Well, I think we're referring here to the 1872 Mining Act,
Yes.
which I think is long overdue for some kind of overhaul. Right now, mining interests or people buying mining land can buy the surface rights and get the value of all those underlying minerals.
That's $5 an acre, isn't it?
Yes,
Is that right?
I think that's right. So that's kind of like the analogy is buying Fort Knox for the value of the roof of the building. I mean, you buy the roof and you got everything underneath. And I think we need to look at that bill, and we need to make changes in it to make sure the American people are getting a fair price for any mining that's going on. As far as the 2 mines that you've talked about near Cook City and Lincoln, I've stated publicly that I'm opposed to the Cook City mine, the Crown Butte mine. I think it's too much of a threat to our environment, and to me, Montana's environment is one of its #1 assets. It's what people come here for, and being right on the corner of Yellowstone and threatening the Clarks Fork River and also the Yellowstone River and all the drinking water downstream is too scary for me of a thought to allow that mine to go in. The Lincoln mine, again, we just saw in the paper that the Blackfoot River is one of the most endangered rivers in the world right now because of the threat of that open pit gold mine going in there. I'm very in favor of a strong environment and a strong ecosystem, and I don't think we should threaten that in any way.
Well, as a resource consultant who's worked with these issues, and I've actually done a lot of flying in the Cook City area and the Crown Butte mine in particular, I think, first of all, that the rhetoric has been maybe a little bit overblown on all sides of that issue. Since I have been there on the ground, I would like to withhold any judgment on both of those mines until I do see the environmental impact statement, because I've done a lot of work with EISs and believe that process needs to go forward. And if they cannot conduct those mining in a safe and sane manner, then I am not going to support it. But let's at least let the EISs come out before we rush to judgment on those particular issues. On the 1872 Mining Act itself, the mining industry, believe it or not, actually submitted a bill in the last Congress to amend that, but it was not strong enough for some of the environmental community, and so the bill basically didn't. There were 2 competing bills, and neither bill went anywhere. But the mining industry has expressed a desire to change that act and has expressed a willingness to also pay more in response to your question.
And last year, the governor signed into law in Montana a lowering of the water quality standards for the state. Do you think this is a good idea or a bad idea?
That water quality standard that you're talking about does not lower the standard of drinking water or water quality in the state of Montana. It actually simply develops realistic standards that can actually be measured. We had standards in place before that could not even possibly be measured. And it's interesting also, I think, to note that the current or the proposed initiative to roll back that law doesn't address the standards themselves that were developed as a result of that. So the standards themselves really aren't under attack in this new initiative.
So you're, as someone who has worked on water issues, then just to follow up, you feel comfortable, you think that the state will suffer no consequences as a result of the, quote, lowering of the standards?
These make tremendous poster child issues, but I'll tell you what, we've got clean water now. Mm-hmm. We're going to have clean water in the future. I do not see any great degradation of our water quality happening in the future. I'm not going to support that. I mean, I've been a fly fisherman since I was 12 years old. I spent lots of time in wilderness areas and dealing with water quality issues in a wide variety of venues. And in my professional judgment, I just do not think that this is going to have the negative impact that a lot of the opponents of this law are saying.
Okay. Do you think airline service in Montana should be subsidized by the federal government as it is now?
You're going to let me
Oh, I'm
answer
sorry.
that question?
I lost
Picking
track.
on Alan all the time.
My apologies.
I don't want to pass that question up because I do believe Senate Bill 330 and 331 that were passed in the last legislature were bad bills. Senate Bill 331 is a water bill that allows increased levels of arsenic to be released into our streams and rivers, and I was totally against it. I wrote Governor Roscoe. I asked him not to sign that. He went ahead and signed the bill, and now we're in the process of putting an initiative on the ballot to repeal part of the damage that was done. Not all of it, but just part of it. And I believe that one of our greatest treasures in this state is our clean water, our clean air, and we need to protect it, and I'm in favor of seeing that repealed. I'd like to point out that one of my opponents in this race, McNeil Waterman, was a supporter of that bill in 1995, which allowed more arsenic to be put into the water.
I might add, though, that the natural arsenic levels in a number of Montana rivers are still many times higher than any of the proposed standards or the original old standards, naturally.
And back to you, Leo. Airline service in Montana to some of our far-flung communities now does get a federal subsidy, and of course it's been struggled about in Washington. What do you think there?
Well, you're talking about essential airline service, EAS, that is so important to a lot of our small communities, not only just for travel, but for medical reasons, to get people to hospitals. And it's unfortunate that the Department of Transportation decided to cut back on these services, and I will work in Washington to try to restore those services.
Essential air service is just exactly that, and particularly in those eastern and northeastern Montana communities. Those people deserve a quality of life, I think, that's comparable to the quality of life anyplace else in the United States. And the only way that they can obtain that in many instances is to have that essential air service. And when you're talking about some of those small communities, it's the only link, only practical link that they might have to the rest of the world. And
the Clark Fork River, like getting back to water, and Silverboat Creek, or it's poisoned. Who should pay for this cleanup? And would you eliminate the federal Superfund cleanup programs? Expand it? What about corporations such as ARCO? Do they have any obligation to help pay for the cleanup of this mining waste?
Well, I think the problem that we have with Superfund, I would not want to abrogate Superfund. We have to make some changes, though, because Superfund has been largely used as a litigation tool more than anything else, and we spent a lot more money on litigation than we have cleanup. We've got to start actually doing cleanup and doing on-site, on-ground work, and that's something that I would support very vigorously.
Again, this kind of goes back to the balancing the budget question, and again, I believe in a balanced budget, but I don't think we should balance it at the expense of our environment. And one of the Republican proposals that came out of this Congress was to cut back on environmental protection programs. And I'm in favor of a strong Superfund cleanup. 1 in 4 Americans live near a toxic waste site. And I don't think we want to live there, and we don't want people to have to live there. So we need to provide funds to clean these up. And if we can directly put someone that caused the problem, whether it be ARCO or anyone else responsible, they should share in those cleanup costs.
Okay. We've got our first caller, and anybody who's watching, don't be afraid to pick up the phone. It's not, KUFM, Montana Public Radio, is busy raising funds this week, but you don't have to pay anything by calling us. So, hold on a second. Hello, you're on the air.
Yes, I have a question for both representatives if they are elected. The anti-terrorism bill is an issue that's been on the national scene, and I've heard the arguments from the NRA and also from the ACLU. I'd like to know how each of these individuals would have voted on that issue if they were sitting in the House right now, and the reasons why.
And do you want to hang on?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, right now, that bill is currently in the Senate right now, and it still hasn't, the final form of it hasn't come out. But the bill as originally proposed, I was opposed to it because even though it's an anti-terrorism bill in the wake of Oklahoma City and a lot of other terrorism things that are going on, Americans are concerned about terrorism. But this bill would not have prevented Oklahoma City. And the problem with this bill that I saw was the fact that it invades a lot of people's privacy. It increases the government's ability to wiretap people. The thought that a person on death row that's convicted of a crime after 1 year would not be able to appeal his sentence even if new evidence came up was a violation of people's rights, and I was against that. I still don't know all the details. It's being argued in the Senate right now. It just came over from the House, and I heard some of these things are trying to be corrected, but I haven't seen the final version yet.
I've got some very serious reservations about the bill simply because of the civil liberties and the civil rights aspects of it. Interestingly enough, I probably do support maybe a little bit of a moratorium or tightening up death row type appeals. But the rest of the bill, I think Leo was correct in his assessment that it would not have prevented Oklahoma City, and I think that it is largely an infringement in many areas, as originally proposed anyway, on civil liberties and the civil rights of Americans.
Caller, anything else?
Well, I tend to agree with both of their positions. I think it is a real affront to our constitutional rights. However, they are wrong in one respect. It has passed the Senate yesterday. It went to the House today. It passed the House today, and it's on the President's desk. Now, I understand it's in a modified form through this process, and I don't really know all the details of the bill either, but it has passed both houses.
Well, thank you for that update. Sometimes driving on the campaign
Yes.
trail across Montana, you don't get the quick updates.
I understand.
58,000 miles of road prevents you from, and that's one of the biggest shortcomings in this entire race is that I'm not able to read like I would like to read.
Right.
How's that, caller?
Yeah, thank you.
You bet. Thanks for calling. Do we have another call? I don't know if we're waiting for another call here or not. Okay. That terrible noise. It's generally agreed that Pat Williams has a reputation as a fierce protector of First Amendment rights. In light of that, do you think the government should be able to censor speech and the work of artists?
Whose turn?
Well, I think I'll go ahead and go first on that. I don't believe that pornography is protected, and I think the civil rights, or not civil rights, I'm sorry, but the Supreme Court has ruled that pornography is not protected under the First Amendment. And I'm certainly not going to be a supporter of what I believe is pornographic materials and I think that I would not support funding of any sorts of efforts like that. At the same time, I don't think anybody is opposed to free speech, political speech, or anything like that.
Well, I'm a strong supporter of the First Amendment rights, not only freedom of speech, but freedom of religion. And as far as the pornography question, I do not want to see any type of pornographic materials that are available to children or that involve young children. I think as you get, and this is a tough question, but it comes down to a question of freedom of speech and freedom of the press, to allow whatever literature that an adult would want to look at and read, to give them that right, even though I may not agree with it. Because, you know, then you got, if you start cracking down on that, then you start getting into questions that a lot of librarians and a lot of school teachers are afraid of. You know, if I carry a book that's a novel and it has something that's pornographic, do I go to jail? And those are the fears that people have. We need to protect these rights. It's one of the rights in the Constitution, and I will be a strong protector of that.
Health care. Do you believe everyone in Montana or in America is entitled to have basic medical care, no matter how much or how little money they have to pay for it?
I do. I do agree that Americans should be entitled to universal health care. Right now, Mac, we have 40 million Americans that do not have health insurance, and I think that's a problem. I think Americans are worried, not only the average middle-class person, but senior citizens, that one catastrophic illness can wipe out their family home, any kind of assets they've saved for their retirement, and it's happening. I think we need to continue to look at this. I don't know what the answer is. There's not one simple answer, but I think as a congressman going to Washington, I would like to raise this issue again because it's a fear that many people have as I travel across the state.
Mac, frankly, as an entitlement, no. We have, that's one of the major problems that we have with the budget in this country is looking at all of these issues as entitlements. I think there's a lot of things that we can do to provide insurance coverage to individuals and promote individuals, promote affordable insurance. But making it an entitlement, no, I would not support that.
Support for the Veterans Administration, let's say, you know, in general, but of course here we've got Fort Harrison. What's, when you talk about, you know, that you disagree with entitlements or what you call an entitlement?
Well, veterans health care benefits are a little bit of a different issue because we have made a contract with some people who have made some major sacrifices for this country and for this nation. And I think that is a contract that we do need to honor. Now, having said that, I've got some serious reservations about the VA hospital system. I think that it's inefficient. I think that the feedback that I've received from veterans and people that I work with in the campaign indicate that it's an issue that really needs to probably be changed, or it's a format that needs to be changed. I think we should maybe think about just simply issuing health care cards to veterans and allowing them to choose the hospital and doctor of their choice in their local communities rather than forcing them to travel to either Fort Harrison or Miles City, which are the only two veteran hospitals in the state of Montana.
I'm a strong supporter of veteran rights and veteran care. My grandfather, my father, I have brothers that served in the military. We have to make sure that we provide good medical coverage for them. Getting back to Alan's statement that he's opposed to all entitlements, I get a little concerned about that because Medicare is an entitlement, and I think we need to protect Medicare and provide that coverage to our senior citizens.
I want to come back to this, but you know, it's somehow in American political discourse and philosophy, we always keep running into you know, one man's entitlement is another man's right. So you could say, you know, just to put it in a rhetorical way, you guys both support, you know, a subsidy to make sure that the small communities in northeastern Montana get the air service, right? But then on the other hand, there would be areas like, you know, the healthcare thing where you would view that differently in terms of, you know, in other words, that it would...
Well, I'd like to issue, I guess, maybe one correction here. The issue is about universal health care or expanded health care coverage as an entitlement. And I want to make sure that I'm just not in favor of any more entitlements. We've also made an agreement with senior citizens in this country about Medicare. I think that we need to make some significant changes, and I've proposed some significant changes with respect to how Medicare is handled. I think we can do it much more efficiently, much more effectively, but admitting that it is an entitlement, I'm not going to argue against the existence of Medicare, because we've got an entire generation of seniors now that depend on it.
And here's another example of this conundrum, this riddle of philosophy. A lot of Montanans enjoy and depend on public radio and public television all around the state. You know, there's big arguments and debates over how long the federal government, whether it should be in the business of supplying monies for the public broadcasting service at all. So where do you hang out on that issue, support for public broadcasting?
Well, public broadcasting, again, as you say, a lot of Montanans listen to it, they enjoy it. It's a commercial-free outlet. It's had a support from the federal government, but it receives most of its support from private, local people like myself. I contribute to public radio. I think it's a great program and a great station to listen to. But I would like to see things like this to continue, so we can receive programs that we normally wouldn't receive in Montana, and I would be in favor of some kind of support for it.
Well, it's a matter of priorities, frankly, in the national budget, and I think we've got to make some tough calls on this. Federal funding supplies, I think, somewhat less than 20% of the money necessary to run public radio and public TV. And given that low figure, I think that public radio and public TV simply need to look at increasing their subscriber base and their donation or foundation base, perhaps, because we cannot simply afford to do everything for everybody. And I appreciate the news in particular that I receive on public radio, but at the same time I just simply think that we've got to make some tough choices, and that federal funding of those programs should probably be at a minimum or eliminated.
Do democracy and free enterprise mean the same thing?
Now that's a pretty deep philosophical question. I think we could probably discuss and debate that for quite some time. I have a tendency to think that they are mutually supportive of one another, yes.
Democracy and free enterprise, they don't mean the same thing. In fact, I've really never heard the two tied together. You know, democracy is how we elect our people by a majority, and free enterprise it relates more to the business of letting businesses operate in a free economic condition. And yes, we have had both. We've been able to have free enterprise and democracy in this country, but we have to be careful about free enterprise. We have to be careful that it's not abused through companies that become monopolies, and that's what we do through the SEC and monitoring these companies, whether it's a break of the Bell system or whether it's a railroad in Montana that is overcharging our farmers and ranchers for shipping our product out of state. We have to make sure that those have to be monitored, and the free enterprise system doesn't turn out to be abusing the Americans.
Just as a little follow-up, I mean, increasingly we see, multinational conglomerates. I mean, they're there. So just as a little follow-up, I mean, is there a point at which big business is finally too big, that, like government, it controls too much about how we live?
I think so, yes. And we've fought this battle over the years, beginning with the breakup of Standard Oil Company clear back in the 1920s. I think that's one of the problems that face states like Montana that are dependent on natural resources and agriculture because of the vertical integration that exists in a lot of these different venues. 80% of the beef market in the United States now is controlled by 4 packing companies. I think that's a serious problem. I think the way that grain is marketed with some of the large multinational grain corporations now is a major problem. And as Leo's pointed out, you can actually ship grain from Alliance, Nebraska across the state of Montana to the west coast cheaper than you can ship it from Billings, Montana.
Could I respond to that?
I'm sorry.
Okay. You talk about multinational corporations becoming too big. And I think this is a big problem that we're facing. As I talked earlier, one of my big concerns in going to Congress is addressing the problem of this shrinking middle class. I mean, there's something wrong in this country when AT&T can lay off 40,000 workers, and at the same time their chief executive officer takes home millions of dollars in compensation. And not only that, we have now AT&T will go over to Europe or Eastern countries in Asia and subsidize their Olympic teams. We've got to look at this. We've got to look at what corporate responsibility really means in this country. Does it mean taking all the good-paying jobs and sending them to Mexico or sending them to Indonesia while we're seeing our American working men and women, people here in Montana, see their standard of living drop, seeing those people working 2 and 3 jobs just to stay ahead, just to keep a level standard of living. So this is a huge problem, Mac, and it's something that has to be looked at, and it's something that government has to look at. Maybe government can't tell businesses how to run their business, but we have to raise a question, and we have to stand up for people who are seeing their standard of living diminish.
Well, just to extend, I mean, in other words, certainly in my observations, especially the last few weeks, and it's been written about, that I think a lot of Americans do find it a bit strange that when the number of people who have found jobs, gone back to work, that when that happens, Wall Street takes a dive, as if somehow big business or, quote, free enterprise was unhappy that 40 or 80,000 jobs suddenly had been filled. I mean, I think that does puzzle Americans, and it puzzles me.
Well, I think a lot of people don't, they're always puzzled about how Wall Street reacts to news. But I think the issue you bring up is a good point, because our corporate board of directors, our stockholders in this country, are forcing our corporate executives to focus on the bottom line, focus on short-term profits, and their bonuses and their compensation are tied to these short-term profits. So what would you do as a corporate executive? Well, what's the easiest way to increase profits? Let's cut off a few more thousand workers. Let's keep their salaries to a 2% raise this year instead of keeping up with the standard of living. And there's something wrong, and we're starting to see some concern about that in Congress, and I think it's long overdue.
One of the problems that we have in this country is that we don't look at legislation in a very unitary or holistic manner. We look at, when we have a tendency to focus all of our attention on one particular issue, and it's very difficult to pull just one single thread out of any particular issue without seeing several other threads of related issues come out. And you can't talk about the declining standard of living and the shrinking middle class in this country without talking about the impact of the increased tax burden that citizens have been forced to pick up over the last 20 or 25 years. It's related to what goes on in corporate America also. And there's corporations in this country that pay little or no federal income tax, and we've got to make some major changes with respect to things like that.
We've got a caller. Hello, you're on the air.
My question would be for Alan Mikkelsen. Alan Mikkelsen, aren't you well known for being the head litigator or the brainstorm behind the Joint Board of Control on Flathead Reservation? And I was wondering how many people on the Flathead Reservation do you feel that you represent?
What the caller's talking about is a local issue on the Flathead, concerning the Flathead irrigation project. With respect to being the head litigator, I have to plead not guilty to that because I'm not an attorney. But at the same time, I have served as an irrigation district commissioner and as the executive director of the Flathead Joint Board of Control.
You hire the litigators.
Well, the board has hired the litigators, and I work with the board. With respect to the issue as to how many people we represent, I would guess there's probably, I think there's about 1,900 or 2,000 irrigation accounts. If you associate a family with each one of those accounts, probably, I don't know, 3,000 to 5,000 people. I'm just guessing.
Okay, well, I see you're playing with numbers there, because I happen to know that a lot of the irrigators are Flathead tribal members, too. So I personally don't feel you represent that many people up there. But, however, I want to ask you another question. If you were king of the world, how's that sound? King of the world? What would you do with the Flathead Indians?
Well, I think that I would do with them the same that I would do with any other citizen of the United States. I've got, frankly, a number of them are very good friends of mine. I opened my farm shop to a number of local tribal members. In fact, they have their tools there and do a lot of their work at my farm shop. So I don't think that I don't treat them any differently than I treat any other neighbor.
Do you let them live on the reservation, or would you do away with the reservation?
No, I don't. I'm not and have never advocated doing away with the reservation system, not only at Flathead but in any other area.
Oh, so you feel then that the Flathead Nation should have a reservation but should not control their own resources?
I believe that when you start getting into this discussion as to, let me say this, I have said everywhere across the state that I believe that tribal governments should control tribal lands, tribal activities, and tribal people. And I don't believe that tribal governments should control non-tribal lands on or off reservations or non-tribal members and activities, because I think there's some due process questions that are involved there.
Let me cut in, caller, if you want to stay on, that's fine. Trying to get a handle on this myself. For example, when the tribe up at the Flathead, and you know more, both the caller, it sounds like, and yourself will know more about the particulars, but the line carrying fuel across the reservation that the tribe finally decided that they had had enough of. They were not happy with the way the company had operated. How, as a non-Indian, is your place on reservation, within the reservation?
It's within
boundaries?
the reservation boundaries,
Right.
correct.
So where do you, when you look at the tribal government take an action like that, what's your reaction to it?
Well, it depends on the individual, or it depends on the particular issue. With respect to the pipeline issue itself, I have a little bit different perspective maybe than anybody else, because I serve as an EMT on the local ambulance service out of St. Ignatius, and to me it's a safety issue. The St. Ignatius ambulance service goes all the way down Montana 200 to Perma. I've climbed inside the cabs of semis that have been smashed trying to extricate people from those vehicles. And I looked at the pipeline purely as a safety issue as far as I'm concerned as an EMT. I've got some very grave reservations about it from that perspective.
I have just one more question, Alan. I went to school with you in St. Ignatius, Montana for 3 years, and if you recall, my name is Alan Matt. I volunteered for Vietnam when I was a junior in high school. Are you a veteran?
No, I'm not.
But you oppose veteran entitlements?
No, I said that no, I don't impose veterans' entitlements. I said that I would support the issuance of, say, for lack of a better term, a medical credit card, if you will, to veterans to allow them to seek medical assistance at from local doctors and local hospitals rather than have to go all the way to Fort Harrison or Miles City if they were from eastern Montana?
Well, I myself work 2 jobs and I pay for my own medical, but I find it very tragic that most of us, I was 17 years old when I volunteered, and I dropped out of my junior in high school, and I find it that back in those days, 1967, people were very supportive of me going off to Vietnam and putting my life on the line. Now, 20 years later, they're beginning to fall back on their obligations to the veterans, and I myself, I'm in support of all the veterans who need it. I don't need it, and I know many of my friends who were vets that came back. We don't need it, but I think the nation of America owes our veterans their due. So.
Well, I would agree with that 100%. In fact, I've had a disabled American veteran driving for me throughout the course of the campaign from time to time, and that's where I have had a lot of discussions on veterans benefits and veterans treatment medically, and so that's why I would like to get a situation or a program developed where these people can seek help locally rather than have to get in a van and drive all the way to Fort Harrison before they get any kind of help.
Okay, I'm going to hang up, but before I do so, do you think that I and you, as lifetime residents of the reservation, can get along and manage the resources together?
Oh, I think so, yes. I do.
Okay, well, I'll let you go now.
Thanks for calling. Leo, I'd like to get back to you because, well, particularly since we're in this area here, because you've spent a lot of time, you're married into the Crow Nation, and you were president of the community college on the at the Crow Reservation. And I did have a question. I mean, Native peoples are Montana's largest minority, and what changes, if any, do you see should occur in the relations between the federal and state governments and the Indian peoples?
Well, I think there's a lot to be improved as far as the relationship between the state of Montana and the Native American tribes of this state. I think there's a lot of confrontation that's going on, whether it be over gambling issues or whether it be over water rights issues or whatever. And I think we have a long ways to go before the tribes and the states can sit down and negotiate the settlement of these issues. I think we need to keep talking about it. As far as the relationship between the federal government and the tribes, we need to make sure that the tribes' sovereign rights are protected. The tribes are entered into treaties with the United States, and those treaties should be upheld. And I get upset when people say, well, it's been 200 years, let's throw these treaties out because now it's 1996. No, those treaties were entered into good faith between the tribes and the U.S. government, and a person's word, just like a government's word, is only as good as long as they keep their word.
And, all right, in a follow-up to that, and then I noted in last week's program, it's been just as in the House of Representatives, there are voting delegates from the Virgin Islands and from Guam, and there's
Washington, D.C.?
There's a couple at Washington, D.C., Guam, the Virgin Islands. And
I think American Samoa also.
American Samoa. And they all have representatives that are in the lower house, the house that you want to go into. And what would you think of having representatives of the Indian nations? Because I always thought, in terms of language, the reality of language, that a nation was more significant than a territory or a possession. And if those territories and possessions had, the ability, as they do, to move around the House and influence legislation and vote on measures, and yet there is no representation from Indian nations there.
Well, you talk about the term that a lot of people have heard, that a Native American tribe is a nation within a nation, because they've entered into tribal treaty rights with the United States government. I haven't heard of any tribes that are pushing that idea. I don't think the Native American people of this country are really saying let's have our own representative in Congress. I think all they're saying, and people that I've talked to, they say, just give us the rights that we have, the rights that have been given to us through our treaties. Let us control the boundaries of our reservation. Let us decide what those laws are going to be, and let us have our own judicial system, and let us just try to make a living, and don't try to get in our way, and every time we're trying to, we develop something that's good, don't take it away from us, which I think a lot of tribal people feel has been the history of U.S. and tribal and state relationships.
We got a caller on line one. Hello, you're on the air.
Good evening, gentlemen. I'd like to ask the candidates, both candidates, to comment, please. I feel that the minimum wage must be raised, and I'd like to know how both candidates feel about this issue, whether we should have legislation to raise the minimum wage. I'll be glad to stand by and listen for your answers. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
We did cover a little bit of that, but might as well
Again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. I think it's overdue that we raise the minimum wage. The minimum wage is at a 40-year low as far as what it will buy in real buying terms. We have many people, single-parent households, that are relying on this minimum wage. I mean, I don't think many of us can imagine getting by on $4.25 an hour. And raising it to $5.15 an hour will still keep a lot of families in the poverty level. But it's a step in the right direction, and I'm totally in favor of it.
I don't think that families, I think few families, if any, are actually trying to make a living at $4.25 an hour. $4.25 an hour, or whatever your minimum wage is typically an entry-level position. And most of the employers that I have met with across the state of Montana who have employees that they value are paying more than minimum wage right now, other than maybe food service industries where they're employing predominantly high school students or young people just starting out. I think that we've got to be very careful here, because I think that the minimum wage can be inflationary, and frankly I think that the minimum wage is something that just simply gets passed on through to consumers in a lot of instances. So I think it's a simple issue. It's a very appealing issue emotionally to understand, but I'm not so sure that you get the results that you want in the long term by raising the minimum wage.
Well, again, I'll go back, and I disagree that not many families are relying on the minimum wage, because 40%, statistics prove out that 40% of the people receiving minimum wage are single-parent households. And the other side of this coin that people don't look at is these people can't survive on the minimum wage, so of course they're getting food stamps and they're getting other kind of benefits as far as health care benefits from the government, and that's costing us taxpayers dollars. So the sooner we can raise some of those levels and get people off government reliance, the better. And again, it's a step in the right direction.
I guess I'd like to continue the discussion a little bit, though, if you don't mind, Mac. I think Leo's right when he says that 40% of people on minimum wage are single-parent families, but I think that begs a question as to what we need to do to strengthen the family structure, what we need to do to amend the tax structure in this country. It opens up a whole another avenue of discussion that we probably ought to engage in, because we have a tendency, like I said before, to simplify problems. We have a tendency to not look at legislation in this country in a holistic manner as to how it's related to different aspects of public policy. I think we don't do a good job of looking at a unitary public policy.
Here's some folks in Missoula know this is getting to be a favorite question of mine. The United States House of Representatives, compared to all the other major democracies in the world, England, France, Spain, Italy, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, has the lowest amount of popular representation in the lower house. Up until 1910, the House of Representatives had always expanded its membership to reflect the census results. In 1910, they, according to some historians, the reasons why the House of Representatives decided to cap its membership at 435 was because this was an all-white male House of Representatives at that time, 1910, 1911. And again, according to some historians of record, that some of the leadership looked around and saw all the immigrants coming from Europe and settling in the cities and the black migration to the northern cities, and they looked around and they said, we're satisfied with the House just as it is. Let's cap it at 435. But using that framework of the other democracies, you know, having a much broader constituency, that is to say in England, and you may be representing, you know, 80 or 100,000 people. Do you see yourselves thinking about expanding the House of Representatives to increase popular representation?
I guess I'll take the question first. I made an offer to people in this race about 4 months ago that if I ever got hit with a question that I hadn't been hit with before, I'd buy them a steak dinner. Well, I ended up buying 3 steak dinners before I withdrew that offer, and I'd have bought a 4th one tonight if I'd have made that offer here, because I've never heard that question. I've never heard that comment or issue raised. I don't think that I would be in favor of increasing the House of Representatives above the current 435. Frankly, it's a very large bureaucracy in its own right now. And I guess I'd just like to make the comment that we hear a lot of criticism and a lot of critique about our government, but we're not the only nation in the world that's struggling with debt. We're not the only nation struggling with the education of its children or the role and size of government. But we are the only nation in the world to which everybody else pays attention to. And if America works well, the world works well. And I think, you know, we've got a system that is messy, inefficient, and sometimes frustrating, but it's still the best system in the world.
And over to you, and we do have a caller waiting on line 1, and we'll get to you in just a second, caller. Thanks.
Just real quickly, I heard Pat Williams. This is the first time I've heard of this idea, but the other day he came out with a proposal to double the size of the House of Representatives.
I'm glad he's finally catching up with me.
Well, maybe it's because he doesn't have to run for re-election. I don't know. But I don't know how politically popular that would be to send 870 people to Congress and try to get something done. And I really never thought about it. But I tell you, campaigning statewide in Montana, and we have the biggest House district in the country with over 800,000 people, you can see the argument of how many diverse interests that I or whoever gets elected to this position is going to have to represent.
All right.
But what
Hello,
a challenge.
you're I think we...
Uh-oh, we lost him.
Hello, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Oh, great. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question was on this minimum wage issue. The figure has gone out that 40% of those are single-family or single-parent
Households.
people that are receiving that. And yet I heard earlier that there was 3% nationwide of citizens in general who have families that are on minimum wage. So I'm wondering what the discrepancy is there. And also a real concern to me on that issue is what happens to my kids when they get old enough to get an entry-level job and it's at $6 an hour, and some employer says, well, we don't want some kid to get the experience or whatever, you know, at that wage rate. And another thing that goes along with that, what happens to folks on Social Security if minimum wage goes up and their income doesn't go up and this minimum wage causes some inflation or whatnot?
Okay.
I'll listen off the air. And
All right. Thanks very much for calling.
thank you.
All right.
Well, let me respond to his first question. His first question was he heard there was 3% of Americans are on minimum wage, and how can we say that 40% are from single-family households? Well, there's 12 million people in this country that are on minimum wage, and it's probably, I'm not sure if that's 3% of our total population. It's probably a little bit more. But 40% of those 12 million people are single-parent households. So that's not contradictory to say that 40% of the people are single-parent households. His other question was regarding his child that possibly wouldn't get a job because the minimum wage is higher and the employer can't hire the person. I don't think history of the minimum wage bears that out. I think every time there's been a raise in the minimum wage, it's been a across-the-board raise. It started out at 25 cents an hour back in the 1930s. The last time we've had an increase in the minimum wage was 1991, and the jobs are still available. As far as a big impact on inflation, I don't think that the history bears that out either. I think, again, minimum wage is at a 40-year low. I think it's time that we raise it.
Alan,
Well, I think that the caller raises two valid points. The first, the discrepancy that he was pointing out or perceived between the 3% and the 40% figure, as Leo has rightly pointed out, there's probably less than 3% of the people in this country that are actually on minimum wage, which is what I said. This is kind of a poster child issue, and it's an issue that's very easy to be on the right side of popularly. But I think that the caller has pointed out some very valid concerns, and they're the same concerns that I've been expressing here, that I think that this may also be inflationary. And I've talked to Montana businessmen who are in the process of laying people off simply because they can't afford to continue, even at the current level. And I think that it would have a negative effect on Montana employment particularly. It might not have a negative effect on a place like New York, but Montana is a low-income state right now, and we've got a lot of employers that are just barely holding on by the skin of their teeth. And I think it could be a negative overall in Montana.
But we also have a lot of families that are holding on by the skin of their teeth, and I think it's time that they get a raise, and I don't think it will be a negative effect in Montana.
Well, I don't think most of those families, though, are working for minimum wage. I think there's a lot of young people that are working for minimum wage, but for the most part, I don't think there's a tremendous amount of families themselves in the overall context of the population.
Well, I would say it probably, the national figures bear up as far as 40% of the families, single-parent families, are people receiving the minimum wage, and I wouldn't be surprised that that's about the same percentage here.
Something that we haven't tackled that we should tackle, because Washington is finally trying to tackle it, and that's campaign reform on the national level. And I'll just throw that out. What kind of campaign reforms do you think are essential?
Well, I believe we need campaign reform. It's kind of funny, when I first got into this race back in January, a lot of people came to me and said, Leo, you're a great candidate, but can you afford to get into a congressional race that will cost you at least $100,000 through the primary and $500,000 or more through the general election? And that's always a question about whether you should get in the race. I think there's something wrong. Now, we've heard a lot of promises about campaign reform. In the Republican Congress that took over 2 years ago, that was one of their big promises. But now we're not seeing anything done. I think they're realizing that they're up for re-election, and the political action committees are out there pouring money into their campaigns, and all of a sudden they're taking a second look. I think we need campaign reform. I think we got to limit the amount of spending in campaigns, and we have to limit the amount that political action committees can donate.
Well, I think it doesn't matter whether it's a Republican Congress or a Democratic Congress. They've both grappled with campaign reform, and I think they both have come up with just about the same results, because it does seem to be very hard for incumbents to limit finances, spending, or anything else. I think that we do need some limits on spending in these, and some very stringent limits on spending in these campaigns, though.
Caller, please be patient, and we'll be with you in just a second, because I want to follow up the campaign reform issue. Is that all right? Oh, that's right. You'll have to get that over the air. I haven't picked up the phone yet, but we'll get right to you. Well, a couple of examples. Both the major parties, the Republican and Democratic parties, get significant millions of dollars just to pay for their conventions, their national conventions. This has always troubled me. If they want to throw a party convention, then why don't they throw it? You know, that's just that. I mean, I guess I'm trying to prompt you guys to some specifics. I think my perception of the country now is that it is, you know, parties seem to be shifting ground a little bit, and we have more, not a third party and a fourth party, and parties do change and remold themselves and change and what have you. But I'm wondering if some of these. All right, so the convention payments, as I call them. And then there's the issue that keeps coming up when the Washington discussion goes on. Well, should there be subsidized or free advertising on radio and television? Now, it's no secret that I take the posture, according to the federal law, that the broadcasting airwaves do belong to the public, according to the 1934 Communications Act, and that there's no reason why the Congress cannot or should not suggest, encourage, and or require, because the chief amount of money in campaigning nationally goes to pay for radio and television advertising. Is there an obligation under the public interest to at least consider, as some people in Washington are doing, laying the law down as far as being able to use the airwaves so that all of you who are seeking public office have an opportunity to speak without worrying about raising money?
Well, I think that would have some appeal to me. Frankly, I think that all candidates should probably get equal exposure and an equal opportunity to get their message out, so voters can have the opportunity to make that kind of a choice.
Leo, a quickie, and then we'll get to line one.
Well, as far as the airwaves go, I had breakfast with an owner of a TV station in Helena this morning, and he didn't like that idea, to be honest with you. We have to do something. We have to make sure it's fair to everybody involved, whether it's free airtime, how much does the stations give up, and if so, do they get compensated for it?
Okay. Hello, you're on the air. Go ahead.
I was wondering about this minimum wage. Instead of raising that minimum wage, how about cutting the taxes? This inflation thing nowadays, a 2%, say, or 2.5% or 3% inflation every year is a lot more than back in the 40s when you had 2% or 3%.
Yeah. Anybody wanted to? Well, I agree. I think we not only have to raise the minimum wage, I think we have to do that, but I would be in favor of a tax cut for our middle-class families. Unfortunately, on the budget that was proposed by the Republican Congress, their tax cuts would have benefited, 51% of their tax cuts would have benefited only 12% of our families. I think we need a tax cut. We need to give our working men and women a break, and I'm totally in favor of that.
Well, I've been an advocate of the flat tax all the way through the course of this campaign, because I base that support on the premise that families should be able to support themselves before they start supporting the government. And the generous personal exemptions allowed in the flat tax mean that 70% of Montanans would pay no federal income tax, and the other 30% would probably pay less for the most part. We've got to get a much family-friendly tax structure in place in this country.
Well, I mean, can I add to that as far as the flat tax? And I'm opposed to the flat tax for the very reason that it's going to make a massive shift of the tax burden from the wealthy in this country to the middle class. And even though, as Alan points out, it's true, many people will go off the tax rolls, the flat tax will take away the earned income tax credit that a lot of low-income families depend on right now that helps them make ends meet.
Let me respond to that.
We also have a caller on line 2 waiting too, so go ahead.
There's a lot of
I've already been on there.
That's a great piece of rhetoric that falls most heavily on the middle class, but I've challenged people on the actual facts and figures on that, and if you work, and I've just challenged people to compare the taxes that they pay now with what they would pay under a flat tax, and when you have 70% of Montanans paying no federal income tax, I don't see how that falls most heavily on the middle class.
Well, let's take an example. The flat tax will tax wages. They tax wages, but they don't tax stocks and dividends. So if you're a Montanan making $50,000 working 40 hours a week, you're going to pay taxes with the flat tax. But if you're someone out in California clipping coupons, earning only stocks and dividends, whether it be $50,000 or $500,000, you're not going to pay any taxes.
But there's 70% of Montanans don't make $50,000 a year, and that's why they don't pay any federal income taxes.
But you're going to take that away, but you're also going to take away the earned income tax credit, which helps a lot of Montanans that are making less than $30,000 a year.
Caller, how's that?
I don't think they even mentioned that inflation bit between the two.
Well, yeah,
You raise the taxes, everything else is gonna go up. You keep raising, you raise the wages, before they get that wage raise in, the price of everything downtown is gonna go up a few cents a piece. And that's exactly where you're going with what you got, and that's inflation. And right now, we're at a really pretty high rate, and compared to what, like in 1940, 2% of inflation wasn't really a whole lot. But you're getting into the area where 2 or 3% of our national amounts of money is getting to be so much we can't afford it.
Well, caller, thanks for calling in, but we're running out of time for the show, and we got another call on line 2.
You bet.
Thanks very much.
You bet. Yeah.
Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, I wanted to know what your point of view is on the legalization of marijuana. What do you think about that?
I'm opposed to the legalization of marijuana. I have a background in law enforcement. I've seen, the results of drugs, and we don't need any more legal drugs in this country in that respect.
What about the Democrat?
I'm also opposed to the legalization of marijuana. I think drug problems are a huge problem in this country, and I don't think we should do anything to make that even a worse problem.
Anything else?
No, that was my only question. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much.
All right. Thanks.
We've got a couple of minutes. We've got just a couple of minutes left, and so it's up to you guys to wrap it up. And I want to again say thanks for coming and spending this time. And you can sign off for yourselves and tell people, whatever you want to tell them.
I'll try to only take 1 minute.
Okay.
But, I appreciate you having us here, Mac. It's been a great show. But I want to end up by telling people who are listening to this, if they want someone who's going to go to Washington, who's going to stand up for them, who has a record of being fiscally responsible, who has a background in business. I'm a CPA. I have 16 years business experience. And someone who's not going to be another person that just a get along and go along type, someone who's not picked by Washington or hand-picked by the inside circle in Helena, someone who's going to go to Washington and fight for Montana's interests, they should vote for Leo Hudetz.
Thanks, Leo.
I couldn't have said it any better, Leo, with the exception of the very last 2 words, and I would substitute Alan Mikkelson. If they want somebody that has a lifetime of experience in agriculture, natural resources, and small business with service to Main Street, small town, and rural Montana, then Alan Mikkelson is the person for that.
Thanks very much for coming by, and I want to thank the audience for tuning in. We'll be having these candidate interview shows through the primary season every Thursday night, and I thank the crew a great deal for coming down and helping out, the volunteers who helped put this show together. And we're at Missoula Community Access Television, one of the finest public access facilities in the United States of America, bar none. So thanks for listening, and music up, and we'll say goodnight. And thanks for being with us.
Thank you, man.
I'm gonna sit down singing some blues, baby. Ooh, gonna try my best to be politically correct. Said I'm gonna around singing some blues, baby. Ooh, Lord, I try my best to be politically correct. And so you won't mistake me for the white patriarchal power structure, honey. I'm gonna sing this song with an African-American dialect. I got them PC blues, baby. Ooh, Lord, they won't let me call my baby gal.